and we'll get going with the workshop.
Perfect, thank you, Sam. So morning everyone, I will share my screen in just a second, and what we'll do is we'll walk through kind of what to expect from the session today. I'll check everyone can see it and nobody's having any trouble, and then we'll just get started. But first things first, I have kind of two screens in front of me, so I might be doing this. I promise you all I'm not staring out of a window. I'm just making sure that I am following what we're going to be doing today. And as Sam mentioned, if you have any questions as we go through, something doesn't make sense, you want me to repeat something, or equally you just want to kind of add to the conversation, then please do pop it in the chat, because it would be really lovely to make this as interactive as possible. I'd obviously love to sort of be in a room, see all of your guys' faces, but the way of the world at the moment, we're doing lots of things remotely. So hopefully we can make this work as best as possible. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen, and I'll do a little intro to what to expect today. So first of all, again, welcome to the art of asking questions. So what I'll do is I'll walk you through an introduction to myself. I'll try not to talk about myself too much, but I'll talk you through my journey to what it is I do today and why I ask so many questions. I'll then walk you through a little bit of a background to design research. We'll have a look at a few research methodologies and focus on one in particular, and I'll explain sort of what they are and how we do them as we go through, and then we'll do a bit of an activity. So we'll be doing the activities together. There's not going to be sort of any picking on anyone. There's not going to be me asking any sort of questions of one individual or another. We'll be doing them all together. So like I say, feel free to make sure that you chime in and you type some questions in the chat for me. So let me just get the chat window up and pop it over here so that I can make sure that I can see you. And then if anyone can't see the screen, it's a massive blue rectangle with welcome to the art of asking questions. If you can't see that, do just pop a note in the chat and we will make sure that we try and fix that for you. So I guess I should talk a little bit about who I am and I guess why I'm chatting to you today. So my name's Amy and I am a principal consultant or principal researcher at a company called Foolproof. And what principal consultant or principal researcher means is on a day-to-day basis, I effectively conduct research. So ask a lot of questions in a lot of different formats, but I ask those questions about design and specifically digital design. So by that, I mean websites, apps, everything from those ticket machines that you see in train stations, ATMs, so when you get your money out and you see that digital screen, I've probably conducted research on that just to make sure that ultimately that system is usable. And what do I mean by that? So we want to make sure that people don't need assistance when they're purchasing tickets or when they're using a website. We want to make sure that it's straightforward, people can get from A to B, they know where to go if they do need help, and examples such as that. So I basically conduct research on digital products. And when I say research, it does sound a little bit like boring and quite a few people switch off at that point. But what's important is that research is one part of a much bigger process. So I talk to designers, I design myself in some aspects. And so all of the research through speaking to customers and users of some of these products is then fed back to creating new designs, better designs, and then just ensuring that things work better for people. When I try and explain that to my parents, I basically just say I design websites, but there is a little bit more to it than that. And hopefully by the end of the session today, you'll get a feel for what I mean. But I wanted to tell you about my journey to where I got to, because user experience, as we call it, isn't necessarily kind of known to everyone. And it's not really commonly sort of acknowledged as, or wasn't actually when I was at uni, necessarily commonly acknowledged as, say, a career path, but it's a huge industry now and it's obviously really, really important. I actually started off doing science A-levels, so I loved science. I thought it was really sort of like logical, as in when you did something, there was a reason and an effect. Everything worked and there was a reason for everything. But there was always a little bit of me that was quite creative. So I also did an art A-level as well. And then I thought, oh my goodness, what do I want to do as a career with two of these things? Had no idea. So NUA was my local university. I had heard great things about the courses and ended up doing graphic communication. And throughout that course, I kind of uncovered a number of different things that have really helped me in my career today. So, for example, we were doing lots of discussions about our work. So we were learning to get feedback and critique others in a constructive way. We were learning to, I guess, communicate and really explain our work and sort of find different ways to get our messages across. So there were lots of things that I learned at university that I use in my career today. And hopefully you can sort of see that path starting to take shape. Towards the end of university, I sort of thought, I still don't quite know what I'm going to do. I don't want to go into graphic design. I think there's probably a little bit more to sort of some of the science side of things and the logic and the practical thinking. And I actually at this point didn't know user experience existed. And there was a bit of a light bulb moment when I was with some friends in, say, a coffee shop, and they said, we were talking about hobbies. And one of them said, what's your hobby? And I sort of thought for ages. And I finally said, people watching. And that does sound a little bit weird, but it was that natural curiosity, the natural sort of thinking around why something was happening. Again, relating back to science, relating back to that practical thinking. I really wanted to know why people were behaving in certain ways. Why does someone walk that way around a shop? Why does someone, automatically know to scroll on their phone, and all of those interactions and behaviors that become quite natural for people. It's quite interesting to unpick and really understand why people do certain things. And so you can see then how I ended up uncovering user experience through sort of networking with other people in the community and other designers. And that is where I am today. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit more about Foolproof and what we do as an experience design agency. If I can find my mouse, there it is. So at Foolproof, who have an office based in Norwich, as I said, we also have offices in London, Singapore, South Africa. We've got much, much bigger in the few years that I have been there. But hopefully you'll recognize some of the brands that we work with. So we do everything from banking apps and banking websites, all the way through to some elements of the PlayStation experience, an interface that you might use. We also have done things for the post office. So say when you go and post a letter, some of the digital interactions that you might have with printing a stamp off for yourself, or even the staff members behind a counter using the till. We have conducted research on some of those experiences, and then we have improved them. Even down to things like Domino's Pizza. I don't know if anyone's ever ordered a Domino's Pizza, but the app and the interactions on there, we conducted research on that as well and looked to improve the experience and the journeys of ordering and purchasing from there. I'm going to pause talking now because what I want to do is I actually want to show you and explain hopefully a little bit better about one particular project. We've got hundreds that I could spend hours talking you through, but this one is quite interesting because Suzuki came to us and sort of said, oh, we want to redesign our website, but they didn't really know why. So they didn't know why certain things weren't functioning on their website, certain pages weren't being clicked on, customers weren't scrolling past certain areas on the page, and we wanted to understand more about the reasons behind that as opposed to just making it look different. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then what I'll do is I will share something else, which is a short video, and hopefully this will give you a bit of a feel for the sort of work we do at Foolproof. So bear with me a second. And I'm just going to press play, so feel free to adjust the volume on your end.
Suzuki came to us with a problem initially, which was that they wanted a new website. But actually, the more we looked at the problem they had, The issue wasn't about building a website. The issue is that the website, at the current state, doesn't give customers the ability to link to those dealers and start conversations with those dealers. So the issue was not just about building a website, it was about linking customers to dealers digitally. We got Suzuki customers into the labs here to talk to them about how they buy cars digitally. And then we also went to dealerships, went to Suzuki dealerships to talk to customers and dealers inside the dealerships themselves. And out of that, we really identified 3 customer types: online-focused customers, dealer-focused customers, and multi-focused customers. And from that point, the design phase began.
So the customer research element was really the reason that we came to Foolproof. We knew that they were excellent at the process of getting that information from research with our customers. And the test and learn approach that we went throughout the design process was really, really useful. Never have I had so many positive comments about how fantastic our new website looks and works. The end product is definitely beyond my expectations and offers our consumers the ultimate website experience.
Sorry guys, just coming back to you there. So what I'm going to do is I'll just go back to the other screen and get that shared, and then I'll sort of talk to you a little bit more about what this might mean. So hopefully that video gave you kind of a bit of a feel for what I mean by, first of all, research and for design research, and we'll talk it through in a little bit more detail in a moment. But the website looks great and there's a load of different elements on there. But importantly, those elements are designed around what customers needed and the sorts of things they were looking for and trying to achieve on the website. So say, for example, when there are options for sort of selecting the different colors or for selecting, say, an MOT or a service plan, we needed to really talk to customers to understand where their priorities were. And then that translated to the design and how we formatted things and the order that we put things on the pages, for example. So there's really a lot that goes into designing, say, websites and digital products. And that's kind of where research comes in and works hand in hand with design. So what is design research? So design research is research that's specifically undertaken to support the strategic design and development of a process. So we don't just do it for the sake of it, we do it to provide a sense of direction. And that's kind of one example of why we do it. But this is where I'd like you guys to sort of dive in. And I'd love if you could pop some sort of comments in the chat or any thoughts you have in the chat as to why we might do design research. So I've given you kind of one example there, but there's also lots of other reasons why we might look to talk to customers, why we might look to conduct surveys or other forms of research. And if anyone has any thoughts, I'd love you to pop them in the chat before we move through some of the next slides. I guess, because I'm not seeing anything come up here, I'm going to kind of go back to explain a little bit more about the process of research itself. So we talk to customers, we talk to users of websites and apps, And we look to understand a number of different things from them. So we might look to understand, say, why they use something, what they're looking to achieve, or we might get them to review a website and get their thoughts and feelings on, say, the color, the presentation. So yeah, I'm going to kind of go on to explain a little bit more about it now, but if anyone does have any thoughts as to why we might do design research, do pop them in the chat as I continue. To ensure your end product fits the need of the consumer and the company. Exactly. So when you talk about customer needs, I go on a website, but I go on a website to do something. So it might be to purchase something, it might be to do a little bit of research, it might be to understand who to talk to or where to go. When you think about, say, booking train tickets or something like that, there are always goals involved with using a website, using an app, using a ticket machine. So we want to make sure that we are listening to the customer's needs and also listening to their expectations as well. Accessibility is a really good point. So it's a really strong aspect of digital design, is understanding accessibility. So we need to make sure digital products are usable, which is something that someone else mentioned there in terms of being user-friendly, but usable for a really, really wide audience. So there might be individuals with impairments or individuals with even a lower digital maturity. So people that just don't spend as much time on their phones and their computers. We need to make sure that they can use it as much as people that spend 24 hours a day on websites. We need to make sure things are really obvious and really simple and straightforward for people to follow. And exactly, an accessibility need that's been mentioned in the chat there is around colour blindness. If you put a button in red to make sure that people see it and make sure people click on it, that's only answering the sort of needs of certain individuals. For those that may have accessibility needs around colouring or tones on a site, putting a big button in red isn't necessarily going to change their experience. So we need to think about different things. And efficiency, yeah, so the time from filling out a form, say, you don't want to spend 20 minutes filling out a form to open a new bank account. You kind of want to get that done so you can move on and do something else. And yeah, reading and understanding things, exactly. You guys are hitting the nail on the head in terms of why we do it. And I'm going to sort of walk through an explanation. And I'm going to use this guy to help me do it. So this is Henry Ford, founder of Ford Motor Company, so Ford Cars. And there's this quote that gets thrown around quite a lot, which is, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Now, there's something about this quote. We don't actually think he said it. So we have spoken to the Ford Motor Company historians and museum at the museum. And there's no evidence that Henry Ford actually ever said that quote. And more importantly, the sentiment of the quote is completely wrong. So it's not necessarily about asking customers what they want. If we ask people what they want, everyone's opinions are going to be quite different. People have different perspectives, people have different likes and dislikes. If you say a faster horse, what does that really, really mean? You can ask these type of questions, but it's much more about a few levels deeper than that. So I want a faster horse, but why do you want a faster horse? And the why is really, really important. And I'll continue into sort of explaining that, which is, if there's any one secret to success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as your own. So yes, we can ask opinions, but it's about understanding what they really mean and where those opinions come from. And by learning different perspectives and getting that feedback from a range of different people, it really helps to kind of like improve an experience or build something that will be accessible, that will talk to lots of people and support lots of people's needs, as opposed to just wanting to make it faster or just wanting to make it a different color. It's much more than that when it comes to design in particular. And by the way, he did actually say that quote. We actually have that written down from multiple sources. So I guess ultimately our goal as researchers, I say our goal, my goal as a researcher, is to understand the world from our users' perspective and ensure that their needs are met by what we design. So we need to talk to the users of apps to order pizzas, the users of people that book tickets at train stations, because I might have done it a few times in the past, but my experience of doing that is very, very different from someone that goes to and from London every day and has much less time and much less desire to sort of spend looking for the best deal, let's say. They want to get in and out really quickly. Whereas you might have someone that's going for a trip with their family, and so they can spend a little bit more time doing things slowly, looking for the best seats or the best deal. You can see that there are lots of different experiences, even from using one product or one service. So another question for you all, and I believe I've got a poll at this stage actually, so bear with me while I figure out Zoom. But I'm pretty sure that what I can do is I can ask you guys, let me just launch it now. There we go. Has anyone heard of guerrilla research? Yes, no, not sure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys, spend a few seconds just filling in that poll, and then we'll walk through the results. I can see the results coming in live, and it's quite interesting actually. There's still a few people to go, so I'll give you all a few more seconds. So has anyone heard of guerrilla research is the question. There's a few more people just to vote on that one, so I'll give you all another few more seconds and then we'll launch the results. Perfect. I think most of you have gone now. So what I'll do is I will end that poll and I'll share the results with all of you. So hopefully you can see that now. Do shout at me if you can't, but I'll read them out anyway. So in terms of who has heard of guerrilla research, so we've got 24% have said yes, which is really interesting. And for those guys that have said yes, I'd love you to start popping in the chat, either where you've heard of it, or maybe you've done it yourself in the past. I'd love to know a little bit more about kind of your understanding of guerrilla research. And we've got 61% that said no, and 16% that said you weren't sure. So let's move on to me explaining that a little bit more. And this is where I sort of cringe quite a lot actually, because this is me. I believe this was in 2014. So what's that, seven years ago? And this is me conducting guerrilla research. So guerrilla research, first of all, I'll start with explaining what the term means. So the idea of guerrilla comes from the fact that research is effectively conducted in the wild. So guerrilla research is going out, conducting research in context, and by that we mean normally where something is being used, or you might expect the experience to be happening or occurring, and you're conducting it on the fly. So these aren't planned sessions, we don't book interviews in, we don't schedule any research. We go and we approach people and we ask them for their feedback and their input. So if you ever see anyone with a clipboard in a shopping centre, or, you know, asking you for a couple of minutes, they're probably doing guerrilla research. And we're going to go on to talk about sort of what it is and what it's good for. But has anyone experienced this? Anyone in the chat, feel free to kind of jump in. What are your thoughts on guerrilla research? And we'll kind of go through and find out a little bit more about it. So what is guerrilla research good for? Now, there are loads and loads of different research methodologies, hundreds, lots of different ways that you can gather feedback, gather input on an idea or a process or an experience. And guerrilla research is just one of them. And there are lots of different things that it can be really useful for. So for example, as I said, you're going out, you're asking people, you're stopping people in the street, or perhaps, you know, at a train station or in a shop or anything like that. It's really quite good if you're low on time, because you don't have to plan anything as such. You don't have to book any sessions in or spend 60 minutes talking to people. It can be really short, sharp questions just to gather a little bit of feedback and direction. And that moves me on to a couple of other things that it's really good for. So it's really, really useful if you're at a point in a project or you've done a piece of work and you're just not sure if you're going in the right direction or if it's making sense. It's really good to sort of pause, take that initial sort of step to ask for a bit of feedback, ask for some input, and then be able to kind of move on and check understanding. I've used it a lot before when I'm, say, lacking confidence in an idea, or if I've, say, laid something out on a portfolio and I'm not sure if it's right, if it makes sense, if it even looks good. It's quite good to sort of build confidence in going, asking for some feedback and knowing whether it is doing what you need it to do. Are there any other thoughts or any other suggestions from you guys on the chat as to what else it might be good for? I'd love to know if either you have used it for those people that have understood it, or some reasons why it might be useful to stop and ask questions and to get some feedback or input on, say, something you're working on. I'm going to talk through how we do it, and if you do think of any sort of suggestions, feel free to put them in the chat as we continue to move through. But I want to explain step by step how we go about planning and conducting guerrilla research. And there are 5 aspects of it. And the first one being deciding on your objectives. So when you think about what it is you want to achieve, or why you want to ask questions, or why you want to get feedback, quite often that's the beginning of your objectives. What it is that you want to get out of research. So it could be a sense of direction, it could be a little bit more confidence in your sort of articulation or presentation of an idea. And then the second element of that is who you want to talk to. So could be out in the street, could be total strangers, could be anyone, but it could also be friends and family. It could also be sort of fellow students or lecturers or teachers. Think about what it is you'd like to achieve, and then think about the best people that will help you get those questions answered and get the input to your questions. And then that leads on to where and when you're going to be. So, for example, if you think about, let's say, teachers or fellow students, it might be kind of, you know, on a lunch break, in social areas, in the canteen or what have you, or in a train station or at home with friends and family. Depending on the audience, it's really good to think about where that audience is going to be and the best time to speak to the audience. I'll give you an example of just why it's important to think these things through. We conducted a little bit of research for a company about a train station. It was sort of train station tickets. And we sort of said, oh, well, we'll just go to a train station at rush hour and stand there and get people's opinions. Does anyone think why that didn't work? We went to a train station at rush hour to ask some questions. Anyone got any ideas? Yeah. Lou, you've got it straight away. Nobody had time to stop and talk to us. And it was just one of those things where you sit back and you go, oh yeah, should have thought of that. And of course, very busy, lots and lots of people, but basically people don't have time to talk to you. So that's why just thinking these things through are really important. And then we'll move on to, I guess, what is the most important aspect is deciding which questions you have. And we're going to talk through some different types of questions and why they're good and why they might not be so good as we move through. But importantly, you need to decide on types of questions and also the number of questions. So for something like guerrilla research, really honestly, no more than 5-10 minutes at a push. Because again, going back to the train station scenario, even if you're not in a rush, you do still want to get somewhere. So people are only ever really going to give you 5-10 minutes of their time. So yeah, just think about the timings and the number of questions as well. And then how you're going to capture the insights. So I've been a researcher for over sort of 7 years now. My memory is awful and my handwriting is also no better. So I often take audio notes or audio recordings. I take pictures of everything. And it's just a way to jog your memory to make sure you're capturing things really accurately. You may well be really quick at writing notes. You may well not be able to record or to take photos, depending on where you are and what you're doing. But always just think about how you're going to make sure you capture everything and remember everything. There was also some really great sort of suggestions in the chat as well as to what guerrilla research is really good for. Getting really relevant feedback, getting different opinions from different ages. That goes back to a really important point we made earlier about getting perspective. It's all well and good asking, say, friends and family, but are they going to give you real honest feedback, or are they going to say what you want to hear, perhaps? Always worth bearing some of those things in mind, and some really good suggestions in the chat as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of, I guess, an activity together. And I'll just come out of presenter mode to make sure that I can, first of all, reveal the objective. So what I would like us to do for this is to, I guess, get some suggestions for these different areas of planning guerrilla research. So let's say that our objective is to gather input on your work to inform the shaping and delivery of your portfolio. So I'm pulling together a portfolio to submit to, say, university, or to submit to something like that. And the portfolio might well be for sort of joining a course. So you might want to gather your work, gather some ideas, gather some creatives to really demonstrate your aptitude for a course, to demonstrate your experience or your enthusiasm for a certain subject or topic. And so you might pull those all together in a portfolio. Now they can be digital. You can also have physical portfolios as well. But yeah, does anyone have any suggestions? Let's say we're pulling one of those together to apply for a course at university. Who might we speak to think about getting some feedback and getting some input? Does anyone have any ideas? I've probably given some clues earlier on in the session, actually. There's some really good ones coming through already. Yeah, fantastic. So I'll call some of those out. So yes, careers advisor, excellent. Previous tutors or clients or even previous students as well. Really good idea that if you can reach out to, say, that university and maybe speak to some of the individuals that have completed the course or some alumni of that university, they'll be really great to offer you some suggestions on, one, what that course is like, and two, the sorts of things that might be really valuable to demonstrate or to include. Portfolio reviewers, absolutely. So often there are people available to kind of help you in building a portfolio and what it is you need, be that lecturers or be that from the sort of careers team. There's normally people you can reach out to support you in that. And teachers and friends. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of existing teachers, they'll be able to maybe talk you through some of the work that they think is a really good fit, but also that they really like, and you can talk through the things that you're thinking about and that you might look to include. And I've said friends, you know, they might be saying what you want to hear, but if you think about the questions and you think about the way that you approach the feedback, actually you might well be really sort of valuable to speak to those friends. So I think you've ticked all of those, which is great. And I think someone has mentioned that they're not sure what's going on because they came in late. Hopefully you'll be able to pick it up as I sort of continue explaining. But basically what we're doing is we're planning a little bit of research based around a methodology called guerrilla research. And we're just going through step by step what it is we might think about if we were look to conduct some research on planning a portfolio. So going back to the people that we might speak to, so peers, lecturers, careers advisors, teachers, friends, where and when might we look to conduct some of that research? Where might we be? Where might we go? And maybe even the timings of when we might look to have some of these conversations. Does anyone have any thoughts? Great stuff. Yeah, so an online meeting after school, that's a really, really good point. So you don't have to do these things face to face. You equally don't have to do these things online and remotely. There's quite a lot you can do, yeah, either or, depending on who you need to speak to. It's just about sort of booking that time in, scheduling that time. Let's say if you are speaking to someone from university, they might not always be available. So you might want to say to them, are you free between these times, and sort of schedule in a remote session or a face-to-face session, depending on what you can make work. But the point being there that these don't have to be face-to-face, you can do these remotely as well. What questions do we think we might ask? So again, to remind you that we're planning a portfolio here. So we're planning to pull together pieces of work, things that we think really demonstrate our creative thinking, some of the work that we've done, and where we might be a good fit for a university course. What kind of questions might we look to ask? This is a really hard one, but is there anything that anyone can think of in terms of the types of questions? Yeah, what the university wants to see. Brilliant. That one in itself is quite interesting, actually, because in that scenario, we might not actually be presenting anything. We might not have anything to sort of show. That might be the first question we ask. So we don't present any of our work. We just say, what are you looking for? You know, name the top 3 things that you want to see in our portfolio. Those kind of questions are really good opening questions to start the conversation, maybe before you show something, before you get some feedback or input of your work. And again, the requirements, again, that might be a great closing question. So, you know, what is it you want to see? Here are some pieces of my work. What do you think of this? And then you might sort of finish off with, in terms of requirements, what do I need to think about? You know, size, number of pages, some of the more practical elements, all really good questions as well. Yeah, what shouldn't be in there? I like that, because quite a few people lean towards what should be in there. What should I include? Try and think about flipping questions like that on your head in terms of what shouldn't be in there. That's a really, really nice question. How to make a portfolio unique? Yeah, brilliant. So I'll sort of reveal some of these, and we will come back to this in a little bit more detail. But I like to think about asking things like, what are your first impressions? So say if I'm showing something, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What's the first thing they think about, or the first thing they see? Too much or too less? Yeah, brilliant. In terms of amount of work, is it too busy? Have I got enough on the page? Nice questions to ask. And then finally, how? I'll reveal this one just so we can kind of move forward, mainly because we talked through it previously. But yeah, just think about when you're having those conversations and you're maybe speaking to a lecturer or a friend or a family member, think about how you might just kind of make note of some of their suggestions and some of their feedback. It's quite often the things that people forget are often the most valuable. So let me just move forward once more. And this is where I have a confession. So this was some of my really, really early university work. You notice I say really, really early, like really early university work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a poll up, and let me get that up on screen so you can all see it. Bear with me 2 seconds. And I would like you to vote for the layout that stands out to you the most. I'm not going to say anything else. I just want you to vote for the layout that stands out to you the most. And I should say there's A, B, or C just underneath them. So if for any reason that is sort of cropped on your screen, got A, B and C just across the screen there. So please vote for the one which stands out to you the most. Give everyone sort of another 30 seconds to take a little look at those. And then please feel free to vote for one as well on your screen there. And I will reveal the results, so you'll be able to sort of see whether you picked the one that lots of other people picked as well or not. Great stuff. So I'll just give that 10 more seconds. So if you haven't voted, feel free to vote for one there, and then we will pause that. Great, so I'm going to end that poll just there and let me share the results. So let's unpick this a little bit more. If I was to ask a question like that, so I've got 3 layouts there. Now you might look at them and go, well, there's not a huge amount of difference, but that's the thing I was struggling with. So I created these 3 sort of ways of demonstrating what that logo looked like. And I couldn't pick which one I should be putting in my portfolio or which one I should be presenting back. And so it's a case of asking a really straightforward question and just getting people's initial impressions. But then I might go on to ask why. And that's the really, really sort of important follow-up that you always want to have in the back of your mind. Why did you pick that one over the other 2? So as you can see, we've got lots and lots of votes for B. And I would love it if anyone who voted for B could maybe just tell me why. Why did that one stand out to you more than the other ones? Great. So there's some really interesting sort of bits of feedback we're getting there. Things like the black outline, the way that the food is in the middle, because it was a mock-up, it had a center point. I just preferred the layout. You can kind of start to see that it was really important for me to understand why B was the one that stood out to people the most. I could have just gone, all right, I'll stick B on there. But now I have a reason to explain and a reason to sort of maybe write up or to talk through when I'm presenting it, that actually it's got a black outline, I can see the logo really easily. So that's the reason why I'm going to put this one on my portfolio and not the other ones. So it's good to always ask why. So let me just move forward. And let's talk about the follow-up. So you gave me some feedback there, you gave me some insight, and then it's really important to think about whether I answered my objectives. So did I work out which one I was going to use? Yes. Did I understand why I was going to use that one and why I wasn't going to use the other ones? Yes. Were there any changes I would make? I'd probably change the way I explained the task, because it sounds like a couple of you were looking at the website itself as opposed to the logo. So maybe I just want to make that a little bit clearer in the future. But you can see why then reflecting means that I can either go away and say, ask more questions. I might go back and ask why you didn't pick the other 2 and why you did choose that one. I might look to kind of unpick that a little bit more if I feel like I need to, but it's just about reviewing the insights and ensuring that you've answered your objectives. So before we move on to an activity, which we're going to walk through some of those things again and get a feel for guerrilla research in a little bit more detail, are there any questions at this stage about what we've covered or anything that I have explained so far? Give everyone just a few seconds just in case they're typing, and then we'll move on. No, doesn't look like it. If there are any questions, then of course do just pop them in the chat as we go through. So what we're going to do now is move through to another activity in terms of the art of asking questions. And we're going to go through some of these things in a little bit more detail. So We covered one aspect of this in the last activity, but we're going to go through it again in a little bit more detail and really think about the delivery of your portfolio. So to make it super clear again, a portfolio is kind of an amalgamation of different bits of work that you might pull together. And you might pull that together for, say, a university application or a college course application. You could even pull it together for a job. So if I was to, say, apply for another job or switch roles, I might look to pull together a portfolio of things that I had worked on in the past. And the idea of the portfolio is it gives the people that are reviewing it a little bit of a feel for sort of work that you do and the sort of skills that you have, but also sort of demonstrates your passion for, say, the course or the subject that you're looking to undertake. So our objective is going to be to gather input on your work and inform the shaping of your portfolio. And luckily for you guys, I have got some more of my work to use as a bit of a starter for 10 for this. Now, I know you guys might have some of your work to hand, or you might have things that you brought to this session to think about how you might approach this. So do feel free to kind of do that in the background and think about your own work in this context. But for now, we're going to have another go at this. So I have got 4 pages from my portfolio here, and I want to ask some questions and get some feedback on them. Who should we talk to? So we should be experts at this by now. And again, I'd love you to pop this in the chat. Who would I talk to if I want to pull together some pages from my portfolio and get some feedback on them? Feel free to pop your responses in the chat for me, and I will type them up here. Yeah. That's great. And what do we mean by an experienced person? Who might be experienced to give me feedback on my portfolio? Teacher, yeah. Mentor, that's great. Other creatives? So yeah, by that maybe, would that be, say, a student perhaps? Yeah, we've got previous students. That's great. Who else might we talk to? Let's say you were pulling together a portfolio for university. Who might you talk to? Who might be you show it to and get some feedback? Yeah, great. If you've done some previous work in the past, people that have commissioned work from you, that would be great. A designer, yeah. Great, so other designers. Yeah, lecturers at the university. That's great. So we'll pause there. I might also put in friends, because I had quite a few friends that were also building portfolios at the same time. So although they might be maybe say what I want to hear in some aspects, they also might be going through the same challenges and thinking about the same things. So quite often it's really useful to bounce ideas off friends in a scenario like this and think about what it is they might do if you're really struggling with, say, a layout or something like that. And then where might we go to find these specific audiences? So again, we might have spoken through some of these as we've gone through the session so far today, but also think about how we might speak to them. So maybe we might do it online, or maybe we might go face to face. Has anyone got any thoughts about where and when we might go to speak to some of these people? Yeah, web chat, great shout. I'm going to put in Zoom meeting as well, because we're doing that now. Yeah, email, that's great. Great stuff. Before school, yeah, so that's a really good sort of time. If you've got something ready and prepared, you can just spend 5 to 10 minutes before school chatting to, say, other students or teachers. Lunch break is also a really good time as well. So lots of things to think about there. It's often just about being prepared, Yeah, by post. Post is a really interesting one, actually. I don't think I've ever done something like this by post, because quite often you don't then get the ability to sort of follow up and go, why? So if you send them a letter and maybe give them some things to give feedback on, you can't always follow up in the moment and just ask that why question. Worth a go for maybe some of the broader questions about, yeah, things I need to include, or how big can it be and how many pages. Something like that would be useful, but maybe not if you're getting feedback on sort of a layout or a piece of work. You might want to have a bit more of a live conversation for something like that. Really good point, Annabelle, you've made there, in plenty of time before the deadline. So just remember that if you're asking for feedback on something, you don't want to do that half an hour before you need to submit something, because you obviously might not have time to make changes and to make adjustments. So that's a really, really good point, and one that I hadn't mentioned before. So definitely something to think about. An exhibition or a show, yeah, of course, like if you are exhibiting a bit of work, or even if you're going to something like that and you want some input, you could speak to those artists or those creators, and also speak to the audience as well and get a feel for their opinion on a few things. Good point there around, would people be irritated if you disturb them on their lunch break? They may well be. So think about, whether that's the only break they've got, with they're eating a sandwich. You might just want to ask if they have time before you start asking a load of questions. They might be able to book something in with you a little bit later. And yes, portfolio days, obviously a perfect opportunity there as well. So I'm going to move on now. I'm going to try, bear with me. There we go. And then the next aspect of this is what questions I might ask. So does anyone have any immediate thoughts? If this was your portfolio and you were putting this in front of, say, we've talked about other students, lecturers, taking it to portfolio days, are there any questions that come to mind that you might look to ask to get some feedback on your work? Which layout do you prefer? Exactly what draws your attention? Brilliant questions, brilliant, brilliant questions. Yeah. Does this clearly show my ideas? So that's an excellent question, but I guess in order for people to know that, they'll probably need to know your ideas. So I quite like going with the approach of showing something and going, what do you think of when you look at this? How would you explain this to a friend or a family? And then from their answers, you can then interpret whether their perspective and their explanation is the same as what you were trying to achieve. If you say, does this clearly show my ideas? We actually call that a leading question in research, because you've used the word clearly. So it basically means that people will quite often go yes or no. So it's a leading question and it's a closed question, because you can answer yes or no. And it's the same for, do you like this? If I say, do you like this? There's been loads of studies that have done, which means that that's therefore a leading question, because I've used the word like. People are more likely to go, yeah. It's very difficult for people to say no. Lots of people will, but it won't give you a really good sort of feeling for whether people do like it or not. They'll quite often just go with the yes, the easy answer. So think about asking more open questions. So what are your first impressions? What do you like, dislike about it? Is an excellent way of balancing that question out. What do you like about it? People will have to find something. Whereas if you go, what do you like, dislike, gives them a bit more of a balance and you get a bit more of a perspective. So there's some really great questions there. What can I work on, improve? A really, really lovely way of kind of getting people to pick out some of the, say, negatives or areas that you need to work on, but it's said in such a nice way that it's going to make people more comfortable to give you that critique and to give you that feedback. So some really excellent questions there. And I've put some questions that I have thought of on here. So what do you think of the layout of the images? I think someone mentioned that one. What do you think of the colour used? So rather than saying, do you like the colour? I've asked them what they think about it to give them the option to say, it's not for me, it doesn't work. What comes to mind when you look at the image on the pack? Would you buy this product or not? That's a really good question to really get a feel for whether someone is engaged in it, whether they like it enough to say, invest time and money on it. Would you buy this product or not is a really great question for that. And then is there anything missing? So let's go through these and we're just going to kind of, I guess, I'd like some answers to some of these questions. So we'll do sort of a bit of a quick fire round here. What do you think of the layout of the images? So if you guys could just quickly type some responses there. If I was to ask you that question about this layout on my portfolio, what do you think of the layout of the images? What might you say? Great stuff. And I'll start typing some of these in while you think of them, because that's going to be really useful to move on to the next stage. So simple. Is simple a good thing or a bad thing? Great. Great. And you don't all have to be nice, by the way. So we'll move on to the next question. The bit in the Earl Grey might look better if it's bigger. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'll write that one down because that's something that I could potentially look to work on. Okay. Great stuff. Let's move on to the next question. And then I'll just make a point that you mentioned the E of the Earl Grey might look better if it's bigger. What comes to mind when you look at the image on the pack? Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Wonderful. And that really gives me an idea as to whether the thing that I was trying to get across, my idea, by your responses there, I can already tell that actually those are the things that I definitely want people to be thinking about. I want them to relax, I want them to be comfortable, and I want them to be thinking about drinking tea and reading books. Perfect. What about the colour? What do you think of the colour used? Okay. That's great. That's really interesting. So from those responses there, sage green would look better. Perfect. From some of those responses there, you can see that colour is very, very subjective, right? It's very different to, people can have one opinion to another, people can like it, people can hate it, people can want something in the middle. What I might do off the back of that is I might actually think about maybe getting some more mock-ups together and maybe trying some other tones, some brighter blues, some darker blues, and then running this kind of research again. And I may well find that actually this colour is the best and it does really work well, but it's a good opportunity for me to look for a little bit more feedback there and to maybe try something different. So it's encouraging me to experiment a little bit more. Would you buy this product or not? Fantastic. And you can see why that's a really great question for me to follow up and sort of say why. Why would you buy it? What would you want to do with this? You know, there's lots of conversations you can have off the back of that. It depends on its price point. Really brilliant point. So I might do, but I've got some more questions. So I might want to do a little bit more explanation. Not a tea guy, it's fine. Not everyone drinks as much tea as I do. And then finally, is anything missing? Think about the layout, think about maybe any of the explanations that are on here. Is there anything missing that you would really like to see? Great stuff. Inspiration, yeah, brilliant. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for all of your input on that. That was really, really useful. I'm just going to kind of show you, I guess, what I might then do off the back of this. So let's say, for example, and if you bear with me a couple of seconds, I'll just move some of these things across. So the Earl Grey could be bigger. That all quite good feedback on the what comes to mind. So maybe I wouldn't look to sort of change or adjust that. Bit of a weird colour maybe. Would you buy this product? Yeah, but maybe I want to know why. So there's a really great explanation here. So I'm not 100% certain on what it is at first glance, but it's quite interesting to look at. So that's a really excellent explanation. Maybe I want to think about inspiration and thought process. So once we've had these conversations and we've got feedback on the layout or the presentation of our work, we've got some really interesting feedback here. But actually, what does this mean for me? What do I now need to go away and do and maybe adjust? And I've talked through some of them as we've gone through, but let me just kind of get these different things just across to this last part of the activity. So I will copy them across to here and let's take a look at those. So you've told me that the Earl Grey, maybe the E might look better, a little bit bigger. So maybe I might want to do some more mock-ups. And for anyone that doesn't know what I mean by a mock-up, because not everyone sort of uses that term, I might just create another version, another sort of sketch or illustration with different size letters. It's a weird colour, so maybe I might try out some more colours and get more feedback. And you can see what I mean is like what I mean by following this process step by step. The inspiration and thought process, I might look to include some more early sketches or some more, maybe a mood board that I used when I was trying out, say, some of those initial layouts. I might look to include that in my portfolio because I got some really great feedback from you that said it wasn't immediately obvious what it was. So I might look to try out some of those things. Apologies, we have just skipped back there. So I guess to take a pause, because there was quite a lot to take in there, I kind of want to talk you through guerrilla research again, the value of it and what that could mean. So today we've talked through my role as a researcher and a little bit about the world of user experience. We talked through design research and the value of really asking for perspective on something that you were designing or an experience you're creating. And then we went through guerrilla research in quite a lot of detail, just in terms of how you might approach it and how you could use it to really influence and gain feedback on maybe your work or something that you're creating. And from the responses I was getting in the chat, it was really obvious that you guys completely get it in terms of how you might look to ask some questions and how that might mean in terms of trying out other things. So that's really, really great. And we're going to give you the chance to ask me any questions in just a moment. But I wanted just to wrap up by sort of saying this and then giving you some tips for portfolios from my perspective. So the goal of guerrilla research is not to provide detailed results. So we might use other methodologies like that, like really huge surveys or speak to hundreds of people. We're not looking for detail here. We're actually looking for just enough insight to help you make informed decisions, which might help you move ideas and projects forward. And some portfolio tips that I thought was a good note to end on. When you think about showing your work or think about putting your work together, make sure that you show passion. So when we look at some of the examples I gave, yeah, it looked great, but actually I didn't really show any mood boards. I didn't really show any thinking. I didn't show a lot of explanation for what it is I was trying to do there. So make sure you show your passion through all of the thinking and the development as well. And it doesn't have to be loads. You don't have to do sort of all of your workings, but it does just demonstrate sort of how you got to some of the ideas and some of the designs or presentations that you might show. Make sure your layout is clear and shows off your best work, and make sure it's relevant to the course you're applying for. So yeah, when we think about the layout of the portfolios that we've shown today, yes, it was clear, but was it really obvious what it was, and was it relevant to the course that I wanted to apply for? That's where you might look to speak to lecturers or ex-students. And then finally, make sure you ask for feedback and do it in plenty of time, so you can make lots of changes if you need to, or ask for more feedback or not make any changes at all. So that is just about it from me today. So it is now your time to ask me any questions. And I've seen that Sam has sort of appeared back on the Zoom call as well. So if there's any questions that I can't answer, I know that those guys will be available as well. So I will stop sharing and open the floor to any questions.
Perfect. Thank you for a really great run through there, Amy. That's really insightful, and hopefully that's sort of given people quite a few sort of tips and tricks and you know, thoughts to take away for their own practice, whether that be portfolio or maybe some other projects that they are working on. As Amy said, do drop your questions over to us in the chat if you do want to find out any more information about what we've covered, or about sort of maybe, you know, things like portfolio advice if you are looking at joining a creative course. For those who maybe have joined us and are considering starting a university course in 2022, maybe next year, we are able to offer portfolio advice, both sort of sessions and guidance, but we do have a really good resource on our website as well, and I believe my colleague Tom will drop that to you in the chat in a couple of seconds. But before we sort of I won't take over just now and go too much into portfolio information. I'll put, you know, sort of open the floor, as Amy said, and do put your questions forwards if there's anything you do want to find out. I particularly love it, like with your sort of example with you know, sort of towards the end, where you really go into like the individual points of a product, and not just how it's an overview of what people think on the surface. You know, it's when you really start to pick the sort of detail out, it becomes so much more, I guess, more complicated, but really more insightful as well, which is really great.
Yeah, because so often when you've looked at something for ages, something you've been creating or designing, or something you've been working on for quite a while, it can be really difficult to sort of take a step back and think, gosh, you know, does this make sense? Is it doing what I want it to do, or do I just really love it? You know, are the colors right? Is the layout right? And some really, really big points there around some of the things that I sort of showed during that presentation. When you first look at some of those pages, it wasn't immediately obvious what it was. And that's so important to get across. So I might think about putting a title. Something as simple as that could change the whole sort of perspective and understanding of what I'm doing. So it's really, really important to get some feedback.
Absolutely. It's great as well. It's good that even, you know, sort of when you're working and with a lot of the things that we do, such as these workshops, you know, getting people's insight and feedback and their different opinions, you know, it's really important to do that. And I think it's something, this is certainly something that's reminded me that I need to do that often more as well, which is great. So there have been a couple of questions. I think you should be able to see them, I think, your end as well, can't you, Amy? I think we've had one from Fadil a bit higher up, which might be more one for us to sort of answer potentially about. Is Behance or personal website better for showing off your work? Is there anything you'd sort of recommend first? I know I've got a couple of points maybe to point out as well.
Yeah, I guess so. Particularly, I guess the particular question there is like, is it better off for showing your work and user experience? I mean, in a way, like, it's a really good point. When you're thinking about user experience, you're thinking about digital. So yes, if you can kind of practice and demonstrate some of that in a personal website, I guess that's another string to your bow as such. It's probably not an essential requirement that you need to have anything like that. You can certainly demonstrate user experience through sort of mock-ups and through thinking like I've demonstrated today. But I know that, and Tom has just sort of like highlighted an important point to me, is that you can use any website builder for NUA applications in particular, but just make sure that you test them, that they are user friendly. So I do know, for example, there are some sites out there that, yes, you can build a website and pull things together. They aren't necessarily that easy to use from a sort of presentation perspective. So give things a go.
Absolutely. And that's something that applies not just to your portfolio for a university course, but for a professional portfolio. It's websites and blogs that we see often a great way of creating sort of a space that's curated by yourself, and you have complete control over that. But then the emphasis is more on you potentially to make it accessible. But ultimately as well, particularly for a portfolio for a creative course, we want to see a platform that enhances and supports the work you've made. And if you've got maybe moving imagery, that could maybe be better placed on on a website, or even on a platform maybe just like YouTube or Vimeo. Whereas if it's static imagery that you're sort of moving through, sometimes a blog or website can be better for that instead. So we've had another good question. So where was it? I've lost it on mine. So Janelli's just asked, do you hold a university degree in UX design or attend a boot camp? And if so, sort of what boot camp would you suggest?
Yeah, so I don't hold a specific university degree in UX. My degree is in graphic communication, which is still an available course at NUA. I do now have a user experience course available alongside the graphics course, so certainly worth looking into. But I went to university like 10 years ago now, so you should all count yourselves lucky that those things are available. In terms of boot camps, so there are loads of online courses available. I know some of the big names like Google run them. There's a general assembly course as well, which I know you can do some aspects offline. There's also some wonderful books as well. So yeah, I don't know whether we can sort of pull a list of suggestions or things together, but lots available online.
Yeah, it's certainly something, as you mentioned, for your own experience with studying at NUA, that over the last few years, I think it's certainly been something that's boomed more, hasn't it? And courses have sprung up more so in the last few years in that area, probably than what they had done before. So there certainly are a lot of options. They're not just at NUA. Obviously, the courses we offer are there to sort of help with areas such as this, but there are plenty of sort of short courses and other things accessible elsewhere. Whilst Amy's grabbing something off of the shelf, I'm going to quickly read the next question we've had, which is I think sort of specifically about applying to NUA and to a creative course, which is, do you like portfolio on websites better, or do you prefer PDF? So again, as we said earlier, it really would depend which platform kind of not just supports your work and enhances it, but also maybe which platform is easier for you to use. We wouldn't expect you to build a website. We certainly wouldn't expect you to be building a big website that involves lots of time and maybe even sort of money. So it's something that, as long as the work can be included easily in a PDF, that's certainly something that we love to see. Google offer quite a good sort of online selection of free tools as well. So things like Google Docs and Google Slides are quite good alternatives to things like PowerPoint. But also the platform that Amy's been using today, Miro, is quite a good site as well, to sort of build a small presentation. So that could always be something worth exploring as well. But there's no preference, whatever kind of is easiest for you to access in lots of ways. But was there a book that you had there, Amy? Is there recommended reading?
This is recommended reading. So some of you guys might have heard of this. It's called The Design of Everyday Things by Donald A. Norman. And it just talks about this idea of the thought process behind designing and creating actually physical objects within this book itself. But it's a really lovely kind of way to get a feel for what user experience means and sort of the real background behind it as a practice. So yeah, I would absolutely sort of have a little look at that one, and then from there there'll be loads of recommendations if you have a little look online. Okay. What was your first UX design job? Foolproof. So I would tell a really quick story about how I got into foolproof actually. So as I mentioned, at university, I studied graphic communication, and in about year 2, I suddenly realized I probably needed to look at thinking about a job or a career that, really led me from that and some of my passions in sort of science and research. And I didn't quite know what there was available at user experience at the time. So I actually did a little bit of networking. So there are loads of wonderful communities in Norwich and elsewhere. There's also lots online where people from various design agencies, people that work in design, that support design, and also from the universities as well, get together and have talks, have networking events. And those are really good opportunities to sort of listen and hear what's going on in the industry. Lots of companies do them as well. So you can online, for example, I know Monzo have a really big community. Monzo, the bank, obviously everyone loves the design of Monzo and the way that it works. Have a little look at sort of presentations and talks from them as well. But to go back to my story, I sort of met Foolproof at one of those events. I wrote my dissertation on user experience, which is that final big piece of written work at the end of university that's on some of the courses. And yeah, then I sort of pestered Foolproof for an internship and haven't left since. So Foolproof was my first UX design job.
That's great. Thank you for that. And thanks everyone so far for all of your questions that have come through. Do keep sending them over to us. Before we do finish up though, there's just a couple of extra bits of information that I'll pass over to you. So it's just a quick reminder really that whilst the summer school program is sort of drawing to a close, we do have spaces still available for you to join our final workshop tomorrow, our Drag Artistry 101 session. So do head over to the website and book your place if you haven't already. If you are, or if you've missed any of the previous summer school sessions but would be interested in watching the recordings via the website, you can also fill in a quick form which will allow you to select which recordings you would like to receive. So there's still time to sort of catch up on anything you've missed. Obviously, there's lots of different areas that we've covered across this entire sort of series. And it's really about picking which area of creativity interests you. So we'll drop a link. I think that might have just appeared, or we'll certainly drop a link in a second to sort of allow you to book your place and get those recordings. Now, we are also offering you the chance to receive an official NUA certificate to sort of prove your attendance at these workshops. Now, that certificate's a really great talking point for UCAS applications and other sort of applications you might be doing to show your creative kind of involvement with universities and projects. Now, to get hold of that certificate, you'll need to just have attended 6 of our 12 workshops. You can watch the recordings and that will count towards that as well. And we want to see your outcomes, the work that you've created from at least 3 of those workshops. Now, please be aware that any work you do submit, we might use just sort of for future promotions in the future. You can send those outcomes over to us at student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. I believe the link for that is in the chat as well. Now, the deadline to submit your work, so only the first deadline, is Monday the 6th of September. But if you have got some work that you would like to submit after that time, do just get in touch with us via email, and I'm sure we can sort of extend the deadline slightly for you. Now, in particular for this workshop, we would really like to see what kind of plan you would have if you were going to be conducting some guerrilla research yourself. Now, that could be about a portfolio you're pulling together, but it can be about any other project that you're working on or another sort of area that you feel like would be a good area to get some insight from other people into. So what we really want to see would be a quick outline of who, when and why, and what questions, very much like Amy sort of walked through earlier in the session. The outcomes you make can be part of the live session, but they can be sort of things you've submitted after you've watched the recordings as well. And if you do have any work you'd like to share with us on Instagram, you can include our sort of tags, which are NUA Outreach and NUA Take Your Place, or rather, not NUA Take Your Place, sorry, it's @Take Your Place _HE, but we'll be able to drop those in the chat for you as well. And do keep an eye on your inbox, because we will be sending out a link with a feedback form just to get some insight into what you felt has worked, areas of improvement for these workshops. And you could actually be in chance for winning one of our NUA Chilies bottles. So do make sure you complete that there. But that's kind of everything from me for now. I mean, a huge thanks for joining us. Huge thanks to you, Amy, for your amazing work. Your run through, and hopefully this has given people some really good insight. Now we have had a few more questions that have come through, so we'll quickly go back over those. I think a few of them might be for you, and a few of them are about the workshop series. So let's have a look. So yeah, attendance. If you watch the recordings, that will count towards your attendance. What we really want to see are those outcomes from those workshops. That's sort of what really shows us what you've been able to get stuck into. And you will get the certificate by watching the recordings and then submitting work from 3 of them. Absolutely. To get the recordings, if you've not been sent them already, you can head over to the website, and what we'll be able to do is drop that link in there again. And from there, you'll be able to sort of request which recordings you would like to receive. Perfect. I mean, we have got a couple more minutes, so I'll see if anyone else does have any more questions at all. Quickly just check, make sure we've not had any other questions pinging in for the inbox or anything elsewhere. I think that's probably all of them so far. So how do you submit your work? So outcomes from the workshops can be sent to us over to our main email, which is student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk, and that is there in the chat for you to copy and paste as well. Okay, well, I think that is probably all of the questions that we've had so far. Do keep in touch with us after the workshop's finished if you think of anything else, and we really look forward to seeing your outcomes from the workshops. So again, huge thanks to everyone for joining us, and huge thanks to you, Amy, for running such a great session. I've had a really great time. I hope everyone else has as well.